Well, welcome to Bible study today. It's wonderful to see you all. It's been a minute. So this is 3 weeks for me from having COVID, and I am still exhausted.
That's what Sarah said.
Yeah, it's my heart rate's still over 100, so I don't know what the deal is. So I'm going to see about eating some more inflammatory freeing food just to help decrease
Have you
inflammation.
lost your
Nope.
taste
Nope.
or smell? Or
I had my taste altered for about 2 or 3 days, and then after that, I taste everything fine. I haven't lost my sense of smell or anything like that. So,
Yeah, it really messes with your body more than you think.
Yeah.
yeah. So it's.
Not just the cough and everything else.
It must be a different strain, don't you think?
I think so. I think it is. Yeah.
I mean,
it's-
that's why you got it. I mean,
yeah, because I had all the shots. So, but
Yeah.
what do you do?
I've had all.
Gary has had it
But
too.
knock on wood, I haven't.
Yeah. So we'll so like I said, if you hear me coughing during this, that's I'm more than past the point of giving it to you guys. Well, for today's text, we are going to be in 20, 1 through 16. So we're talking about another parable. And so the first thing I really want you to listen for when we start this parable, and this one is only in Matthew. So you won't find this parable anywhere else.
Because they didn't understand it.
Yeah. So we'll talk about that, and then we'll also talk about so if you're keeping track, because I know you all diligently do, and we're looking at parables and how Matthew relates to Mark and Luke and all that sort of stuff. So Matthew's been following Mark pretty well up until this parable. So this parable sort of changes. There's a sort of a shift, and Matthew goes back to sort of following Mark's guidance through the rest of the text. But 21 through 16 is different. It's really much a text that is sort of hard to understand, like Louise was saying. You know, what is really going on in this text? And so as you read this, the first thing I want you to clue in on is what is this parable about? And it happens in the first sentence. And I'll just say it for you. For the kingdom of God is like. So that's the preface to the parable. So the kingdom of God is like. So that's what this whole story is sort of getting us to see. So who would like to do 1 through 5?
For the kingdom of heaven is like a landowner who went out early in the morning to hire laborers for his vineyard. When he had agreed with the laborers for a denarius for the day, he sent them into his vineyard. And he went out about the 3rd hour and saw others standing idle in the marketplace. And to those he said, "You also go into the vineyard, and whatever is right I will give you." And so they went. Again he went out about the 6th and the 9th hour and did the same thing.
6 through 10.
About 5 in the afternoon he went out and found still others standing around. He asked them, "Why have you been standing here all day long doing nothing?" "Because nobody has hired us," they answered. He said to them, "You also go and work in my vineyard." When evening came, the owner of the vineyard said to his foreman, "Call the workers and pay them their wages, beginning with the last ones hired and going on to the first." The workers who were hired about 5 in the afternoon came, and each received a denarius. So when those came who were hired first, they expected to receive more, but each one of them also received a denarius.
Who would like to finish this out 11 through 16?
When they received their pay, they protested to the owner, "Those people working only 1 hour, and yet you paid them just as much as you paid us, who worked all day in the scorching heat." He answered one of them, "Friend, I haven't been unfair. Didn't you agree to work all day for the usual wage? Take your money and go. I wanted to pay this last worker the same as you. Is it against the law for me to do what I want with my money? Should you be jealous because I am kind to the others? So those who are last now will be first then, and those who are first will be last.
Okay. Clear as mud, right? What is Jesus getting at when he says this parable? What do you guys think?
Well, for the kingdom of heaven is like.
Yeah.
Heaven.
So the kingdom of heaven is like. So-
I have an explanation.
Perfect. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Unfair pay. Jesus' story makes little economic sense, which was his point exactly. He is giving a parable about grace, and you can't calculate the grace of God like you can a day's wages. We receive it as a gift from God, not as something we work hard to earn. The person who comes to God at the end of life, like the robber on the cross, enjoys the same ultimate benefits as someone who follows God from early childhood. Jealousy of another's unfair rewards can take the joy from your own.
Absolutely.
Yep. It's just showing how generous God is.
So how do you feel about that?
When I see that part of it, it's great. When you read it from the laborer's part, then you're mad because we're just always taught fairness
Mhm.
and you know, fair work for fair money and all that kind of stuff. You know, when you look at that, then you're just pissing mad.
Yeah, absolutely.
But when you see it from the other side,
So I would invite you to think about, so as you some of the things you were just talking about, our sense of justice versus God's sense of justice. So I think the interesting thing here is, so when you think of the kingdom of heaven, how do you think of the kingdom of heaven? So what do you think heaven's going to be like?
we wouldn't care about that stuff.
Okay.
We're just
I
Could
don't
be
think you'd
praise
even
and
remember it, would you, in there, in heaven?
Would you remember it? That's a
I
good
don't-
question.
I don't think you would.
It's a good question.
I don't think you would.
So tell me what heaven's like.
Well, that's a loaded question.
It is.
Oh, boy.
Well, you think everyone would be treated the same, but yet he's got his right and his left.
Yeah.
So that makes you wonder.
Okay. Tell me more about heaven.
You just zip around in your little wings and
Yeah, could be. Could be.
I
I'm
actually
sure
wish
it's
we knew
nothing
more.
like what I
Yeah.
think.
I wish we did.
in your halo.
Yeah, it's
They probably all wear cleats on the bottom of their shoes.
for all those ice clouds up there. Absolutely, absolutely. But I think it's so the reason why I'm asking you this question is because I think a lot of times we really are very narrow on what our concept of heaven is. I want you to dream for a moment. What does heaven look like? Is it basically this world but a little better?
oh no, it's
Or something-
a lot better.
Or something completely different?
Then where is it?
And where is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I know it's in Iowa, but I mean that's.
New corn mazes every day.
Yes, exactly.
Such a corny joke.
And smell hogs.
Ace Hogs, there you go. But what do you think? Like I said, I think a lot of times we don't even take the time to think what heaven's like. I want you to use your biblical imagination right now. What's heaven like? There's no right or wrong answer.
Well, they say streets of gold.
Yeah.
Okay? Streets of gold,
And beautiful colors.
beautiful colors,
And beautiful music.
beautiful music,
No pain.
Banquet feasts.
banquet feasts, no pain.
Yeah.
No hate, no fear,
No hate, no fear.
nothing.
No tears.
No
Do we know
tears.
people?
What's that?
Do we know
I don't know.
people?
Yeah, will
Sure.
I know my
Sure we
dad?
do.
Will you know?
Okay.
Well, don't you think?
I don't know.
That's a good question.
But then
What's
will
it-
I know the people that I
I'm-
We
don't
should
like?
though, but they
Yeah.
talk
Will I
about,
remember that then?
what?
The people that I don't like?
You don't have.
Yeah, but
any
you won't have any
control.
hatred.
They won't
Any
be there.
hatred towards them.
But then how will I know love then too? Will I know my
Karen.
mom and dad?
Don says they won't be there.
So an interesting story I've heard was that I know you might have heard this as well too. Is that in heaven you'll be seated next to the person that has hurt you the most, as well as the person you have hurt the most.
Oh,
Really?
Oh no, I have not
Oh.
heard that.
That's just like I said. That's a saying, or like another saying, or another story I've heard before was the difference between heaven and hell is in if everybody's given hands that are utensils, and in hell no one can eat because they keep getting in each other's way, and in heaven they feed each other, and that's how you're able to eat. So those are just stories. I mean, those aren't anything in the Bible or anything like that, but those are.
Let me ask you this then, too. For the people that are in the military, like say my father and my son who fought in wars,
Yeah.
are they gonna be presented before the people they killed in war? I mean, we don't know.
We don't know.
Yeah,
That's a good
that's
question.
one of the good things I learned here.
Yeah.
So many things are up in the air. It's like,
just
how do I know?
Yeah, you don't. You
But-
not until we get there.
Yeah, I know, yeah, but, I mean, that's.
And take your time getting there, though. I would advise that.
You have to think about that stuff though, too.
Yeah, and what version of yourself will be there?
Yeah,
Because is it going to be the 20-year-old that's there? Is it going to be
Yeah.
when you
The
die?
child?
The child? Yeah. What we don't know. And are we going to?
But are we gonna even have bodies?
There we go.
well, the Bible does say that, the late 20s, early 30s body we will have, correct?
I don't know. I don't
I've
know.
always heard that. Isn't that spoken in the Bible?
I'd have to look. I'm
But
not
what
positive.
about
Well, the other part.
But what about the stillborns or the miscarriages?
Yeah.
I mean,
Are they gonna also
what
be
kind
funny?
of what kind of
You remember
body
Ray
do they
Weinbein,
get?
don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, he always used to tell me a cool story. He said his wife, they lost a baby at childbirth. Maybe
Who-
Ray
which-
Weinbein. Ray.
Artist?
Ray Winding?
Yeah, his wife lost a baby right away at birth or something. And right when she was dying, he always told me right when she was dying, she kept talking about that baby.
Really?
She could see him, or her.
She had a miscarriage, but
Yeah.
not.
Oh, yeah, miscarriage or whatever.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, Ray always told me that. He's told me that several times. I thought it was pretty cool.
I'd never heard that.
Yep.
But to Karen's point, there's a near-death story of this young boy that while he was clinically dead, they came back and he claimed to his parents that he saw Grandpa.
Mhm.
And he had never met him,
Had never met a, no.
never met him.
When my dad was passing away, look at all those little children. Do you see them? Look at how they're
Oh.
playing so nice together, and on about those little kids.
But is that something that God just gives us to see when we're passing away?
That peace and the peaceful
Yeah.
feeling.
Is that just something that He provides us with?
I have seen people die who have not been at peace.
No.
Oh,
So it could be.
Billy
But-
Graham always talks about that. You've said once that he's witnessed many people die. Some, like you say, that were at peace and some that were not. You say there's a vast difference
Mhm.
between the two. Big difference.
There is a vast difference.
Yes.
Yes.
Hey, Loretta, they practice the sirens on the first Wednesday of the month.
Yeah.
That's what you hear.
I always thought the purpose in heaven was just to praise and worship God. So will all of this other stuff even matter?
Good point. I don't know. We're not going to find out a lot till we get there. But I also want to push you a little bit on your imaginations, though, because I think a lot of times we think of heaven as this faraway place that we just sit on a cloud for harps and that's it. But I as exciting as your life is right now, don't you think God has something just as exciting for you to do in heaven? I think a lot of people think they're going to be bored in heaven.
Oh,
No, I think we have jobs to do.
Yeah.
Lord, give us something to do.
Yeah. Don't you think that we're going to be doing something exciting up there?
Well, I personally, I don't mind. I believe that we, if we have a special hobby that we like, we will be doing this. If, always, you ever notice all the farmers, they always die in the spring and in the fall. Why is that? I like to believe God needs help. Maybe that is wrong. Maybe I'm totally wrong. But that is the truth. You take notice of that. It's in the spring or the fall.
And I'll add a lot of people tend to die during those transition periods. But yes, that would be, you're absolutely correct in that. But it tends, at least from what I gather, people tend to do that because of the change in the seasons. And those, you tend to see more people, not always, more people tend to die in the fall and the spring.
Oh.
Yeah. At least from my...
No, I agree.
So you kind of think we have a say-so in it then? Of
Uh,
choosing?
Say so when we die?
Yeah, I mean, as do.
So I'll tell you a funny story. I'll tell you a story. So I was at St. John's as a hospice chaplain, or just a chaplain. And so I was a hospital chaplain. I was talking to this lady who they called me in to see, and she was just crying. Her grandma just died. And I said, well, she said, but this is really, she said, she said, I'm really happy. And I said, well, tell me more. Tell me what happened. Well, she had been in Romania when she got news 2 days prior that her grandma was dying. And she had to make it from Romania back to the United States. And she had to go through, she was telling me about all these, these flights that she had to take. She had to get these taxis. She had to get on these ferries. It was basically an obstacle course to get back. And she said she got back and her grandma was there and they talked, they had lunch together, and she's told her grandma, I'm going to go down to the hotel just to check in and I'll be right back. And her grandma died as soon as she left. She waited for 2 days to make sure her granddaughter could come see her.
Yeah.
I firmly believe
heard
that.
I've heard that a lot.
I firmly believe that. So there's a lot of times too, and if a certain grandkid or somebody is supposed to be there, that person will wait.
I've heard that many times.
Yeah, so there is some sort of some sort of thing that we do have some control, but I think at the end of the day, we don't know when we're going to die. We hope we have long, productive lives. That
Do we have that control, or is God allowing that
To happen, yeah.
yeah,
As a blessing.
it could just be that
They
too.
need it.
Yeah.
Sometimes people die after everybody leaves too.
Yeah.
So I'll die by myself.
That's what Dad did.
What my dad did
Yeah.
when everybody left.
And that's
that
what I'll do
they
too.
passed away.
I already told my family. I said, when you leave, that's when I'll die. I said, I'm not going to die when you're around. That's just me. I'm just not going to do that. So that's just not like I said, I don't like people around me when I'm sick. I just
Well,
Yeah.
We were in talking to my dad in the hospital, and the nurse came in and said that she needed to change his bed linen.
Mhm.
If we could just step outside for a little while. We weren't outside the door 30 seconds, and she said, he's gone.
Yeah, so it's another. Yeah, I like, Don, what you're saying, that it's a blessing that God gives us to give that little extra time to say, I want you to say goodbye. So, so as we keep talking about heaven, so the interesting thing about this from a pastor's point of view is they don't teach you anything about heaven at seminary. It's very rare. You might have a seminar on heaven, maybe. I think in the 8 years I went, the only time I got to talk about heaven at all was actually when I was first checking to see if Luther was the place I wanted to be, and that was the reason why I went to Luther, was because I went to they had a seminar about heaven, and they were just talking about it, and it was but there. Here's the secret there. They have as much insight as we do right now.
So speculative.
Yeah,
It's all
they don't know.
speculation
Yeah.
because we haven't been there. So, but I want you to start thinking about. I want you to use some holy imagination to think about, what does heaven look like? What does that?
What about these people that do physically die and then see stuff and then come back?
Yeah.
So, are they seeing a true heaven, or are they just seeing what God wants them to see? I don't know that either.
It's a hard question. Or is
Why
it?
can't you answer my question?
Well, the one thing I found as a pastor, just like Jesus, the more questions you answer, the Jesus doesn't answer a lot of questions. He gives you a lot of
A lot
questions.
of questions, yeah.
Yeah, and I can tell you right now in seminary, they gave you a lot of questions and very little answers. So, because like I said, we just don't know, and that's that part of faith. You know, faith is something that is not certain. You know, faith is taking something we assume is going to be certain, but I don't have any physical evidence, or you know, there's as much as I talk with certainty about my faith, I can't go to a textbook and say, okay, on page 94, this is why I can pull this equation out, and this is why it tells me I'm going to go to heaven. I don't have that, but there's a lot of things, and a lot of people say, well, then how do you live your life with faith then? Well, a lot of people, especially including atheists, live their day by faith all the time. You have faith that the person who's coming towards you at a stop sign is going to stop. You have faith that when you go to the store and hand them a $20 bill for change, they're going to give you the right change. You have faith that when you go to a restaurant to eat, they're going to give you non-poison food. You have faith that the water that you're drinking out of the water bottle is not contaminated. There's a lot of stuff that we take on faith all the time.
One I always use is, did you check your chair before you sat down?
Yeah,
It's a chair.
Yeah.
You have faith that it's made to be sat on.
exactly.
No tack on it.
Yeah, there's no tack on it, and it's going to hold together too. So I think there's a lot of point that, you know, as much as people say, well, I live, you know, and I think science is great, and at the same time, I also live by my faith as well too. It's not an either or type of game, and I think so many times that, especially nowadays, people are like, well, you either believe in faith or you believe in science. I'm like, well, why can't you believe in both? If you look at the early scientists, that's what they were. They were pastors, they were nuns, they were monks, they were, you know, and they figured out science. And they saw science as what it is. It's an expression of how God is moving in the world. And, you know, nowadays it's like, well, no, it's not. And I'm like, well, why not? Why can't it be? It's just a simple way to express how God has made the rules to this place. As much as God has made the rules to here, what are the rules that God has put in place for heaven? Are they the same? Are they different?
One of the fastest growing groups coming to Christianity is scientists.
Yep.
When they first put the original Hubble telescope out there, and they saw so much more than they ever knew existed.
See, I don't understand how people can actually be atheist. Because Rosina was telling me she's staying with her cousin down there, but cousin took in a foreign exchange student from Germany, and he speaks English. So they got talking, but he was telling Rosina he's an atheist. She's never actually met one and talked to one before, but how could you not believe in something if you're an atheist? Because all you gotta do is look out the window. How do you explain that?
They'll just tell you, well, that's science.
Just deny it.
Well, and so everybody believes in something. so atheists, we all just choose what we believe. So some people believe in money. Money is what saves you. Some other people, well, my physical strength and my ability to do whatever will save me. I mean, atheists believe in something. They don't believe that there is a God. But they, a lot of people, you'll hear about people who believe in karma. They'll believe in, luck. They'll believe in a lot of different things. And I think a lot of times with some atheists, I think Christians have rubbed them the wrong way. And so, if you look at one of the scientists, I can picture him, Hawkins. Stephen Hawkins, yeah. He was Jewish. And one of his first books was talking about how he thought God created the world. In some sense. And so then he had an affair with his aide, divorced his wife, and the Jewish community came down on him for that because, he had adultery. And then all of a sudden, I don't know what you guys are talking about. There is no God. There is no, there's a lot of times when people have this sort of run-in with the religious thing where they get checked with sort of what they're doing, or they get wronged. I mean, what Steve Jobs, I remember there's a story about him going to church and his pastor, he had a bunch of questions and his pastor told him, you don't get to ask any of those type of questions. And so Jobs never became a Christian because of that pastor saying, no, you can't ask those type of questions. You can't do that. And I'm like, so I think some that's not saying all atheism, but some atheism is a bad interaction with church folks. And so that's why I always try to. So one of the things that we do here that I occasionally get flack for is I baptize anybody. We can debate that in terms of stuff. But the way I look at it is if somebody comes to church and says, hey, I need something, I want to get somebody baptized. How can I say no to that? I mean, because
that's when they need help.
Yeah, that's when they need help. And do we want to be the church? Because there are churches that will tell them no.
Yes.
You need to go through this 5-step process or whatever the case. Or the other reasons why we give communion to anybody. As long as you believe, you can have communion. Again, how do you feel when you go to a church and they look at you and go, you're not a member, so you do not get communion? I get really angry because
It's not for them to decide.
exactly. When we read the words of institutions, it doesn't say, Jesus said, well, you're not a member of such and such church, and so you don't get communion. I don't read that in the words of institution. I don't read that anywhere.
Don't get Karen started.
So that's something that we do to help sort of allow people to get that positive experience of God. And I wonder if and so that's the other reason why we sort of talk about, so for Lent we're going to be talking about the way of love. And so what does it look like if we sort of embody our Christianity into our daily life and people start seeing it as a positive force? Would we start seeing people who are less likely to say that they're atheists, or people that are more curious? Oh, I want to know more. I think it'd be interesting to see if we can start doing that. If we can get people more interested in having people understand the Bible and reading the Bible, not because we quote Bible verses at them, but because we live out our faith. So.
And I really wonder how many atheists there are, because I've read that 80% of the world's population believes in a higher power. And I think that other 20%, I really think they're more agnostic than
Right.
atheist. They just don't know.
Right. They just
rather
don't
than
know.
to just flat out say there is no higher power.
Right.
If you haven't been exposed to a church, if your family doesn't go to a church, maybe it's just a label you give yourself
Right.
to
They don't
explain.
know.
Well, I'm just an atheist.
Or if you look in your only experiences with like the Westboro Church, that goes around protesting everything. I wouldn't want to be a Christian. Maybe look at that and go, I ain't doing that. If you guys believe in God, I can't do that. Or they see instances where Christianity has been very hurtful and harmful. So so we've gone through a lot of topics. Talked about heaven today. We've talked about faith today. So all out of this parable, and that's what these parables are designed to do from Jesus, is to get us to talk about bigger issues. It's not just about a landowner giving away money. It's about looking at our lives differently, looking and asking some hard questions too. Because I think, how many times have people thought about heaven in the last week? Not too often. So this is to give us, to engage our faith a little bit and to push us to say, okay, so this is what, the faith could be like this. So think about it a little bit more. Engage with it a little bit more. Imagine a little bit more. I want you to use your biblical imagination this week and think of something that could happen in heaven.
You know, one thing I have often thought of, and I've even been afraid to say to anybody, Satan was an angel.
Mm-hmm.
What's to say when we get there that somebody won't become another Satan up there?
Good question. We don't.
But the Bible says eternity.
Mm-hmm. We don't know if there's anything like that's going to happen. However, I would think too, I think this is the reason why God doesn't make us automatons. We're not machines. God gives us choice. And I think as we look at the choices we have, and I think it's understanding this text like this well too, when you think of what does it mean for us to be happy for somebody else as well too. And I think it's getting back to understanding this world isn't all about me, it's about we. And I think that's where the devil fell short with that. And I don't know if 30 million years from now, when we're all up in heaven, if there's another devil that comes along. But I think God will deal with it the way God always does. But it's also interesting how God deals with it too. I don't think God just... Satan did get out of heaven, but I wonder what the process was. God sitting down with Satan. So I notice you're having a hard time right now. I notice that you're having these feelings, and I see this. You're talking to, Thomas down the road there, and I just noticed the interaction you're having today. Can you tell me what's going on? I don't think God just drop kicked Satan out of the sky without having those types of conversations, without having those sense of time together. So
It was Satan's conversation with God regarding Job before or after he was
kicked out.
kicked out of heaven.
Yeah, that's a lot of good questions today. But we got to go to service here pretty soon. So
I have one other question
Yep.
about the parable. Every time the owner goes back to the marketplace, there's more people.
Yep.
Why weren't they all there early looking for a job? Were the last
Because
ones,
they were lazy and they slept in.
well, were they only looking for a 1 hour job? So they didn't show up until,
or someone else didn't feel that they were worthy to work. That's another thing too. That was one thing that my commentary talked about. Is it wasn't necessarily that they were lazy, but that people didn't think they were capable of doing the work. So they might have been there all morning, but I don't think you can lift that boulder. I'm not going to hire you. Or some people, a lot of those people that they don't talk about too. how many of them were handicapped? How many of them were, only walking on, had a crutch, and stuff like that? How were those people physically able to do or not do stuff? How many of them were blind? How many of them, were in their 90s and still wanting to work?
Well, that's kind of where the grace comes in, that
Yeah.
this little thing mentioned.
Yeah.
The robber on the cross, the grace in the end, maybe
Yeah.
he
Yeah.
would
Because
take the one with only one leg and a cane in the end, because he could do the 1 hour.
yeah.
Was this parable in front of just the disciples or in front of a crowd? Because I was wondering his last statement, so the last will be first and the first last. How well did that go over with a big crowd?
How well does it always go over? I mean, even with the disciples.
I was just curious, I could just hear the rumblings.
Those are the same words that end chapter 30 or end chapter 19 too.
Mhm.
Right before we started reading. The
Right.
first
Right.
will be last. And
Yeah, I think a lot of it was too. So the hard part of that is a lot of times Jesus, Matthew and some of the other gospel writers aren't always very good at saying, okay, he's in front of all of his disciples, or he's in front of. And sometimes when they talk about the disciples too, is it other people besides just the 12? Because there's other people that hang around Jesus as well, just not the 12 of them. There's also other ones that hang around with them too. And so, was it that crowd, or was it a bigger crowd? Was he at a synagogue and doing this? He could have been doing that too. So, either way, he's going to make people mad. And that's part of Jesus. I don't think is trying to make people mad. What Jesus is doing is really trying to get people to think differently.
Yeah, but they're probably taking this
Yeah,
as it was said.
Absolutely.
Literally.
absolutely. So then I'll invite you again. So what do you need to take this week and tweak a little bit
Tweak
and turn on its head?
upside down.
So, because I think there's everything like that we can tweak and put up. So, well, let's pray.